One of the topics that we need to talk about is triaging external forces. One of the hardest things that humans have to deal with is when do we focus on our own goals and the things that we want to accomplish, and when do we respond to the needs, requests, and influences that we receive from others? And we all know people that are on the extremes. Yeah, we know people that are completely focused on what they want to do themselves, and they ignore everything around them, and they don't give a flying hoot about what others may think of that. And then you also have people that are extremely responsive and receptive to what other people ask for, and that basically seem to be lacking their own drive or their own sense of direction. In psychology, this is often referred to as the disagreeable versus the agreeable axis. And we all sit on this bell curve. Some people sit very far out to the disagreeable side of the curve. These tend to be honest, successful entrepreneurs as well as criminals. And on the other extreme end, we have the more likable people, which often have a lot of friends and have more of a support system around them, but are also the ones that often tend to suffer more heavily from anxiety and other mental afflictions. The interesting thing is that this does not only apply to individuals, it also applies to companies. What we see is that some companies have defined a strategy and they're basically executing on it. And no matter what customers, partners, or suppliers tell them, they will not deviate from that course. They know that they're right and they will deliver on that. At the other end of the spectrum, you have companies that have basically no strategy, but constantly seek to respond to feedback from customers and others. And as I've mentioned in earlier videos, in my view, Agile is at heart more on the passive side of the spectrum. It's very much I'm getting all these requests from customers, sometimes through product management or otherwise, but basically I'm in a very responsive or a reactive fashion, basically building what companies want. And this leads to an interesting situation where I see that all companies claim that they are customer focused, but the problem is that many of them interpret being customer focused by reacting to or responding to every whim that a customer may have. And although it tends to lead to positive responses from customers in the short term, over time, we end up in a situation where the company becomes overworked because there are always more requests than what we can handle. And over time, more seriously, this tends to lead to commoditization and decreasing competitiveness. And this is an interesting conundrum. How can it be that by being very customer focused and responding to our customers, we actually end up in a bad place? And I think that there are at least three reasons for why this happens. I mean, the first is irrelevant additions. We see very often that customers ask for things that maybe help them a little bit in the short term, but over the longer term, there's little relevance for the customers as well as for the company itself. And basically, you're wasting your R&D resources on things that customers in the end really do not care about that much. You may make them a little happier in the short term, but in the long term, they're not getting the big value-adding things that they would really benefit from. The second is that you end up with often very small additions. Customers ask for a small tweak here, a small change there, a little bit more configuration in another area. And because what you get to is, because so many customers have different wishes and requests, you end up in a situation where this product increasingly becomes bloated, it becomes complex, and it becomes inconsistent from a user experience perspective, because it's often impossible to hide one extension that you did for one customer for another customer, so the other customer now also has to deal with that thing that they actually never asked for. And if you do that for long enough, we end up in a situation where the system is just a bloated thing with very poor usability. And the third part is that very often this process of being customer focused in the wrong way is that you tend to add important new and differentiating functionality too late. typically what happens is that we wait for customers to ask for new important functionality before we actually build it. And I think we all realize that if you wait for your customers to be able to verbalize a request, you have waited too long, because the need that customers are now able to verbalize was already present for quite some time. They were just not able to put words on it. And if you're afraid of disruption, it is during this time that disruption happens. Customers have a need, customers are unable to express the need, but if someone offers them a solution, they will very often get disrupted, because they then see that what you are offering, what you as an incumbent are offering, is actually outdated and not so relevant. There are, in my experience, 3 important tactics to consider in order to avoid falling into the traps that I was just discussing. The first is distinguishing between customer first feature request and customer unique feature request. A customer first feature request is, there is a customer, they tend to be a little bit more forward-looking, a little bit more leading in the way that they think about things. And what happens is that they will ask for things that when you are evaluating that request, it becomes pretty clear to you that it is very likely that also other customers will want to have the same functionality over time. That's a customer first request, and you should definitely bring that one into your backlog of what to build. The second type is customer unique request. This customer has a very special, unique setup. They want certain solutions, but you can basically see that whatever you're going to build for them will not add value to any other customer. So what you have to do is you have to be really careful on how you handle those requests. First of all, you most certainly do not want that functionality to end up in the product. It has to sit outside of the product. And the second is, if at all possible, you should try to decline to actually build that functionality for the customer. Basically claim that that you have no resources or something else, but try to avoid having to build that. One effective way of doing that is by offering the customer something else, something better. Yeah, so rather than saying, oh, we're really sorry that we cannot build this for you, you say, we are struggling, but what we can offer for you is this other thing, which will add a lot of value as well. Because no one likes to hear a no, but if you're able to define an alternative, something that the customer gets instead that maybe could be considered to be even more valuable, that is often a better suggestion than just a flat no. There are, however, situations where the customer will bring things to a head, and you will be forced to actually doing the work for the customer or losing the customer. And this is where I think you reach a point where you may need to fire the customer. And this is a very difficult thing for many companies, because we feel that we need customers, which is of course the case, and that it is extremely difficult to fire a customer. But if the requirements of that customer do not fit the vision and strategy that you've set for your organization, you should not allow yourself to be pulled off course because of that customer. That's all about triaging forces. It doesn't mean when you quote unquote fire a customer that the customer gets no longer to use your product. They can still use your offering, but you deprioritize the customer, and you basically limit the amount of account management that they're getting, the amount of support that they're getting, and you instead focus on the high value customers, the high priority customers that you want to serve and that you believe optimally align with what you want to accomplish. In startups, there's often an important distinction that is made between making customers happy and making happy customers. And the difference is that making customers happy means I do everything for every customer in order to make that customer happy, which of course is what you should not do. Whereas in the second alternative, you basically first define what is the kind of customer that you want to serve. And then based on that, you focus your energy on making the customer that profile that you want to serve and make those people as happy as possible, because that's where I think we would really benefit from in the long term. So at the end of the video, I want to repeat what I started with, which is Agile is at heart a reactive and passive approach. It is a passive paradigm. And this can very easily lead to a situation where you think and claim that you're customer driven, but instead you get an overworked organization, you get a lot of bloat and complexity in the system, you're reducing your competitiveness, and but through that you're increasing your risk for disruption. So instead, even though we need to be responsive, we need to maintain our focus in the execution of our strategy. And that means that we have to be very careful in how we triage the external influence and forces and intentionally decide which things are we going to follow up on and which ones are we going to ignore. And I think with that, I want to end with a quote of John Durr, which I think is critical. Ideas are easy. Execution is everything. Execution is really hard. Making these ideas live and real in your organization, that's the real struggle that you have to deal with.